for the purposes of this assignment, what you guys are going to be working on, I want to give you tools that anyone can use, whether or not you feel comfortable with acting, whether or not you're interested in acting, beyond this sort of thing. If we were to kind of go to a deeper level of acting, we would start to spend more time talking about the psychological zone of the actor. What I mean by that is, the first question, how do you get into character? And the way that an actor really gets into character is by taking on a motivation. The first question is, what is my motivation? What does my character want? And in that way, acting is just like playing a sport, right? You get on the field, you get on the court, and the first obvious question is, what is our objective here? What are we trying to do? And then as you get playing that sport, you're connected to that, and that is what's driving you the whole time. And that is the source of your emotion. That's the source of everything. So what an actor does is treats the character like they're going to play a sport and say, all right, well, what's my goal? It's not getting a ball into a hoop. It's killing the king or getting the girl or whatever it is. That's the motivation. And as an actor, you find a way in your imagination to connect to that, get on stage, have that motivation, and let that drive every single thing you do. Every line that you say, every way that you move. But connecting to a motivation takes some work, takes some time, takes some training, takes some learning. So we're not really going to focus as much on that. And I wouldn't want you guys to get sidetracked on that project of how do I connect to a character's motivation without sort of the proper time and attention that we need to spend to that. So some of the things that I'm going to focus on more have to do with just really having fun with the language and just having a good time with it. Oftentimes with acting, it's a great way to measure whether you're doing well. Well, am I having fun? Or do I feel this sort of awkward, self-conscious kind of blah about what I'm doing, right? So the more that you guys in your group can just kind of cut loose, relax with it, have fun, make really, really clear, specific choices with your language, go really big and bold and dramatic. Again, this is Shakespeare, even though you're going to be kind of paraphrasing it. It's Shakespeare, so this is about big, bold, and dramatic stuff. Don't worry about overacting. That would be my advice to you, okay? But just to really have a good time with it would be the main thing when we talk about, someone asked about sort of what would your main advice, and I'd say for this context, let that be it. Memorization, I'll say a few things on that. Memorizing isn't as hard as you think. There are real techniques that help you do it a lot faster. One of those things is memorize out loud. Memorize it out loud. Saying it, because then your body's memorizing it, and not just your mind. So, yeah, there's value in sitting with your headphones on in the library and reading the script a bunch of times and trying to memorize like that. But it'll be a lot slower than if you're actually physically speaking as well. So out loud, key thing for memorization. Another one, memorize exact words, even to paraphrase. The reason for doing that is if you allow yourself to paraphrase as you're memorizing, your brain gets confused because it's got like 3 or 4 different versions kicking around up there. And when you go for the line, you'll be like, what, is it this or is it that? Last time I said it this way, the time before that I said it that way. So take on the really specific and sometimes tedious work of memorizing exact words. It's actually, memorizing is a lot easier with Shakespeare than other plays. And we could talk for a while about why that is. But even if you're paraphrasing, that exact thing is important. And the best way to do this is have somebody else quiz you. Don't be on your own, because you can't tell if you're paraphrasing, right? Because you're doing it from memory. But have someone else memorize with you, have them read the script, have them be really hard on you, and force you to get everything done. It'll be painful at first, but it's the fastest way to go. So out loud and exact. And remembering that memorizing isn't just about memorizing, it's about really understanding your character and knowing when you forget a line, when you find yourself forgetting a line, it's most often because you don't like that line. and or you don't know why you say it, or why you say it that way. So that's when we get tripped up. We don't know why our character is saying that at that moment, or why they're saying it in such a weird way, or a way that feels weird to us. So when you find yourself forgetting a line, that's a real opportunity for you to analyze the character and learn something more about the character. Like, well, gosh, why does she say that at that point? Okay? So memorization is never just about memorization. So those are some tips there. What do you do when you're not talking on stage? Someone asked about that, and you're just listening. This is where that question of motivation comes back in. So you're carrying the character's motivation with you, and you're always thinking in that terms, right? So they're listening, they're reacting to whatever's going on. They're always engaged, just like in life, Hopefully right now what you're doing is listening. You're not saying anything, but you're taking in what's happening and you're processing it. The only thing that's different on stage is you're doing that from the point of view of your character, right? Does your character like what's happening? What's going on stage? Does your character not like what's happening? Is your character trying to think of a way to maybe jump in and change what's going on? So you always want to think of your character as being active, in motion, and present. And what sometimes doesn't work out so well in acting is when we kind of take turns of like, I say my line, and then just sort of out of it, right? That always sort of looks unnatural and weird. If your character just has one line in a scene, they're saying, what's going on? Right? You're done saying your line, but you're still sort of sustaining that, trying to find out what is going on, even if you're just standing there. And then you find out, right? And then you're reacting to that, you keep listening, you're engaging, versus, what's going on? That's kind of what you do when you're not talking. Managing disagreements in your group is tough. The general rule with acting is you don't direct another actor, because that gets awkward and sort of uncomfortable. And sometimes we want to direct another actor, not because we're bossy and feel like we know best and want to tell everybody what to do, but just because we want the scene to work, right? And you're like, I'm supposed to be feeling this way on this line, so it really helped me if you kind of said your line a little louder, or could you come in like, punch me on the shoulder when you say that? Or like I kind of want to give her some line to make it easier for me to do my thing, give her some direction. But that just ends up kind of tense and awkward. And so the general rule of actors is you just work off whatever the other person's giving you. And you do your job, and they do theirs, and you leave it to the director to give directions. The problem is you guys are all working together as a team. You probably don't have one director. And so I would say the general rule is just to be sort of sensitive as you're coming up with ideas on what people should do, and to have an open mind yourself about receiving directions and just sort of thinking, well, what's the best idea for the scene, and not taking it personally if someone's like, it might work better to do this, or could we try that? But if everyone's just kind of interested in, hey, what's going to work best for the scene, what's the coolest idea, and not too invested and sort of insecure about taking some direction and changing, then I think you can navigate that. But disagreements are good in that they're a sign that you care, that people actually care about what's going to be good for the scene. So, you guys know U2, a band, Bono. He's got this quote about, you shouldn't be in a band if you don't like a good argument. And it's just sort of generally true in the arts and collaborative arts, right? Sometimes there's going to be some arguments, but the main thing is, okay, what can we all agree on as sort of the best choice and not get too personal about our ideas? Does that make sense? I wish I could give you some more kind of clear-cut, sort of surefire ways of not having any conflict, but hard to do. So that's some sort of general advice. Hopefully that's helpful and makes sense to you guys. What I want to talk about today, what Ms. Cundill and I talked about, me focusing on, was how do you block a scene? Blocking is a theater term just for staging, for movement. So what we're really talking today is about movement. How do you move in a scene and block? And what I want to do is give you guys some tips on how to make your movement both natural, because you want it to look natural, real, and interesting. the audience will really be engaged in what you're doing. So I don't know what the best bet is. I know this is being filmed. If you guys will look at this later, or if you want to take some notes, either on notebooks or if you've got your computers or something, but I'm going to give you kind of a list of things to remember as you go into blocking. So, or you might designate someone from your group. Someone want to be a designee, a scribe for each group? Who wants to be the note taker for their group?
Oh, no. Oh, you got it? Okay, okay, thanks.
Caroline.
Good job.
I don't have paper.
You're telling me I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay, Bella, good job.
I lied.
Thanks for volunteering.
I already have it up.
Wait, who's got it? Seriously.
Let's just have someone be bold and volunteer.
Michael.
for the group.
Jack, be
Instead
bold.
of volunteering.
Thanks.
Instead of volunteering up
Yeah,
there.
you're voluntold. You're being
I'll
voluntold.
do it. I'll do it.
All right.
Do you have a piece of paper?
Okay.
No, I got
I do
it.
not.
That'll go
Thank you,
fast.
Michael.
Now you're fighting over it. That's why I don't. That's why I'm denying it.
Do you have a piece of paper? Yeah, all right. Thanks.
One more thought generally about acting before we move on. As I try and think of, okay, what things can be helpful for you guys to think about acting that I can give you just in passing and then kind of, you know, when I'm not going to be progressively on it. And there's something that a teacher of my grad school used to say where he'd say, don't wait for the god of acting to come down and make what you do good. So sometimes we get out there, we sort of say our lines and we hope that they're turning out okay. And that's what he meant, like that we're hoping that the gods of acting just sort of bless what we're doing and make our acting good. And his point was you kind of have to make really clear, specific choices with your lines. They're not just going to sort of come out automatically. You've got to really be intentional about it. And again, have fun with it. You know, and really ask, what is my character after? What do they want in this line? And how might that inform, you know, how it will come out, how it would say to that other person, okay? So remember, you really gotta be active and intentional in that process. And that's gonna be the theme now as we talk about the movement part of acting. Okay, so first question, how do we make movement natural? Okay, so that's the first thing you guys are gonna be writing down. And the main thing, it's really one thing for making movement natural, and that is for movement to be motivated. In real life, we move because we have a reason to. We want something. We want to get closer to someone, we want to get farther from someone, we're trying to do something, we're trying to get something, we're trying to express something, so we gesture. So movement comes from desire. On stage, we sometimes forget that, and we move just because kind of we feel like we should be moving, and so there's just sort of general motion happening around the stage, and you're kind of saying your lines, you feel like it's too boring to stand still, so you're sort of doing this, but this doesn't really work. It's kind of weak, and typically in Shakespeare scenes, you have people who are strong, really making a point, and so this sort of generalized movement can weaken you and not read very well. So remember that stillness is fine. Stillness can be a powerful choice. So you can just sort of stand, say what you have to say, or move with a purpose. Having a really clear, big movement where you're trying to get close to someone for a reason, or move away from them, or go down to help someone, or you have a really clear reason for movement. So make it motivated. That's the key word. And avoid any extraneous, just sort of general movement that might happen, oftentimes called script feet. We have our scripts in our hands and we're sort of doing this, and I always kind of tell actors stop doing that. So that's how basically how you get movement to be natural. Also, for movement to be natural, you want it to be specific, really specific. All right, so if you tend to look around in the way that people are sitting in chairs, sometimes we get on stage and there's a chair and you're self-conscious, you're self-aware, so you just sort of sit down in this very kind of generic, normal way, right? But again, think specifically, right? How might your character be sitting down? What might be a more natural way of sitting, a more normal way of sitting? Is the person disengaged, sort of apathetic, and really slouched down, right? Are they maybe on the edge of their seat, talking like this, right? Are they, I don't know, sitting on the chair like this for some reason? I don't know. But remember that you can be really specific and unconventional in how you move, because that's how we do in life. So don't be too generic about it and keep it motivated. Okay, we're going to talk now about how to make it interesting. So basic rules of, we call composition. Like in photography, you talk about the composition of a photo, the way things are set up within the photo. So I need a couple volunteers for this. 2 volunteers. 1, 2. All right, come on. Okay, so if you guys stand side by side up here, facing us, just like you're going to kind of talk to the class. All right, let's have you kind of both in the middle there. All right. So what's positive, what's good about this setup right here? You can see both of them.
I don't have their backs turned to
They don't have their backs turned in. Yep. They're far back so that everybody can see them. All right. Even though it gives this would be a little bit there, but can see them. But what's maybe not so good about it? What's that? Doesn't look natural, right? 2 people standing side by side, just sort of the hands on, right? Yeah, I just got this one, but yeah, it's a little flat composition. They're both on the same plane. They're facing the same way. So even though it's useful in a sense, and we can see both of them, it's a little bit flat. So here's some things we do to sort of change it up. So say the scene is that they're both looking at the sunset. Okay. If you, what's your name?
Maya.
Maya. So if Maya steps forward, right here, okay, and they're both still sort of looking this way, sunset. Now you have depth. So depth is a key word to write down for composition, depth. Okay, theater is 3-dimensional. We want to take advantage of that. So depth is a little bit more powerful than just having it. And even in film, because I know that we're doing films, so some of this can translate to the composition of what you're doing with your film. You can have depth in the picture. Okay? And so if you turn around and face, what's your name?
Jesse.
Jesse? Okay, so if you turn around, please. Okay? And what you have here, distance. It's another key word. So depth, distance. Oftentimes on stage, actors, it's a big stage. It's a little nerve-wracking to be up there in front of all those people, and you kind of gravitate naturally to a piece of furniture or to the other actor because you kind of feel alone and in the middle of nowhere up there. And sometimes it's good for actors to be close together, but we want to remember that distance can be a really powerful choice too. And we think about distances between characters. Okay, sort of adds to tension. All right, and can I have you actually stand on this chair here? You did it last class, and it seemed to be okay. And then let's have you sit there. All right. So yes, a nice low chair there. So another thing that we have working for us is height. Differences in height can be very powerful. So here you have some depth, right? She's sort of in the back, she's more towards the front. You have distance, and you have differences in height going on. Obviously, differences in height are good for communicating differences in status, right? So she seems like the more powerful person here. But depending on the scene and the context, that could also be the position of power, to be the one sitting, right? If she's on trial, something like that, playing Shylock. Okay. So height can be a really interesting thing to use, and that's something you can do even in your films. All right, next one, specificity. So being really specific. So you guys can give them some directions. So what are some things you might change, subtle things, each of them still being in this position here, but change about this picture? In terms of the way, their posture, where their hand, what they're doing, their hands, where they're, just random stuff. But don't think so much about the storytelling. Let's start with, I'm sorry, Jesse. Yeah, so let's start with Jesse. how can we specify how she's sitting there? That might change the tenor of the scene. We give her a direction. Sit on the edge of the seat, okay? All right, maybe lean in. How about pointing? Maybe she's gonna be leaning in. Yeah, leaning in
I like that.
and pointing out. Yes, right, like that, okay? All right, well, let's give Maya a direction.
Just like that.
Yeah, just stay like that for now. So we're just working in pictures, stage pictures at the moment. All right, so let's give her direction. Yes. What's that?
Put 1 foot on the desk.
1 foot on the desk.
Is that okay, Ms. Kendall? Yes.
All right. Okay, so we have something more specific, more powerful, more interesting going on here. All right. So again, we want to be non-generic. We want to be specific in our movement. Okay, you can sit down. Contrast. So that's the other thing for the note takers to put down, contrast. Between motion and stillness, again, movement is really important. You've got to have movement on stage. But if you have movement all the time, that becomes boring. Any one thing for all the time becomes boring. So when you watch an action movie, I don't know if you guys have ever seen an action movie and there's crazy sequences and things exploding, people are going to be actually bored. And the reason is if they do too much of that and it becomes all the same pitch, becomes all one note, even though it's really active, it's not as interesting to watch. So a really good action movie has just the right contrast between simple, still scenes and really big, explosive, crazy scenes. So you guys want to have that. And that's what a director sort of tries to feel out in a scene. How much motion, how much stillness. Remembering that stillness is okay. And that it's all specific and it's all motivated, either way. And then also contrast with other things like distance, closeness, being near, being far. So when that translates to film, that could be camera angles. Okay, it might be really cool to have a picture of people talking and the camera's really far away, you see both of them, and you have sort of the landscape surrounding them. But then it might also be, and then cut to a real close-up of just their head as they're talking. So having close-ups, having distant shots, all these principles can apply to film in different ways if you're creative about it. All right? So those are some things about movement. Do you guys have questions on any of that so far? Is it all kind of making sense, some of those principles?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Good. So, the next step we started doing in the last class, we just have a few minutes to get started. 2:05? Is that something?
2, yeah.
2, okay.
Yep.
So the next step, and we may not get too far into it today, that will help you in your group with movement and just direction of the scene in general, is breaking up the scene into parts. And the technical theater term for that is beats. And no one really knows why, but we've been calling them beats for a long time. And beats are just sort of the scenes within the scene. So what you want to find with your group is, when does the scene change? You're going to break your scene into 5, 6, 7, 8 sections. When are there changes in the scene? And what are really obvious changes in a scene? What are some examples of really big, obvious changes?
What might change the mood of a scene, guys?
Okay. Yep, entrances and exits. Start there, because that's easy. Right? Whenever anyone enters, whenever anyone exits. That's a beat change. Okay? More of the subtle ones are when one person is kind of changing their tactic. So if you look at scenes, and Shakespeare always writes this way. Everything that's happening in the scene, we tend to think of Shakespeare as writing a lot of words, and he does, but all of them are driven by motivation. All of them are active. The characters, clearly, that's why he's such a great writer, and why he's such a great writer of plays, and so actable, is that all that language is driven. A character is always trying to get something, is always trying to accomplish something, and they're trying different things. So for example, if I want that algebra book, and I'm trying to get that algebra book from her, because I lost mine and I need it desperately, all right? I might have different tactics. I might start out demanding it. Come on, I need it. Give it to me, right? And that's the whole first part. But then I might change. And then I might realize that's not working. And I might just sort of say, please, come on, right? I'm just sort of saying, like, I'm appealing to her humanity, so I just really need help. And then that doesn't change. That doesn't do anything. So then I resort to begging. Come on, please, I just need it, right? So all these new tactics, 3 different tactics, you know, all in the same model. So whenever there's a change in tactic, okay, or whenever one character might be driving the scene, might really be the person in control, all right? One person might be yelling at the other person, telling them everything was wrong with them, and then the other person starts to say, well, you know what? Now I'm going to tell you about what's wrong with you, all right? And then they start to drive the scene. So if you kind of look at your scene like a sports commentator who's sort of saying, you know, so-and-so does this, and then passes the ball here, and does this, and you look for action, and you look for describing the action of the scene, that will help you find those beat changes. And then once you have your scene sort of broken into chunks, that'll help you with cutting, because I know you guys are going to do some cutting, right? It'll help you with the paraphrasing, and it'll help you with thinking about how movement happens in the scene. Because often, big movements happen on those beat changes when there's a real distinct shift in the scene, all right? So, we should probably just, if we stop at 2, right? So we should probably just cut there and kind of